Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's a stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, and welcome to it. It's a Tuesday, brand new week here. We are well on our way into February 4th, 2025, streaming to you live on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. If you haven't already, please smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. We're over 4,500. We're going to get to that 5K, guys. That's the next level up. Grateful to have you along with us today. If you listen to the audio format on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, do subscribe there so you can get the show updates, because we drop them there after we get done on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time. Today, we're talking about a whole different game. It's been sort of a shock factor the last couple of weeks. We're 2 weeks into a new presidential administration, into a 208-week term. And you can definitely see the up-tempo, the shift. It's a 2.0, the revenge tour is going on. It definitely seems like there's an appetite nationwide, not just in Washington, D.C., to have a tremendous change in the pace of way we do things and the tack that we're taking. And that includes maybe putting some of our elected officials in prison. And once we got that taste of blood in our mouth, we're going to go after some more. We're going to actually break into some of the directed energy weapons that have been reported on, and how maybe the government is going to have a greater overall capacity to influence you, the American people, which is not good, but then also very good that we're going to stop the foreign aid and maybe funding Big Bird. A lot of random stuff, but it all sort of trends in the same direction of this is not the same game, which would explain how we have a thumbnail with chess pieces on a pool board. All right, I'm here for it. It's fun. And it's fun to talk to my friend Garrett O'Boyle. You can find him social media at GOB Actual. And that is a movie reference of the day. Send it, sir.
Okay. Live or die. Make your choice. Hello. Do you want to play a game?
No, I don't want to play a game. Games are for children, especially the ones where you wind up having to saw off your own foot.
I do want to play a game, Steve. I want to play whatever this game is.
I am here for it. I have to be honest. It's definitely outshone my expectations. I think we talked about it before, even from our little silo where we like to dunk on the FBI. We thought there was going to be some nibbling around the edges, and then they just came in with Execute Order 66 last week, and that's continued apace. You and I are kind of sitting here just watching it as spectators and asking if you want extra butter on your popcorn. But it is fast and furious, man. This whole thing that's been going on for 2 weeks, and I said 2 out of 208. I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain this pace. It's kind of like going out into a marathon in a dead sprint, which I have seen, and those people normally bonk out around mile 1. But you never know. I mean, they have surprised us along the way, and I'm here for it. And at least if we have to stop the pace, we'll have the memories before we go off to the FEMA camps. I want to talk about going after politicians, which is something that I think most Americans would love to see more of. And we finally got one of them, and maybe we're going to get another of them. Who did we get? Senator Bob Menendez.
Bob.
Gold Bar Bob. Ex-New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez. He got 11 years in prison.
Dang.
Garrett. That's like half as much as Enrique Tarrio. Like, that's serious time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and Enrique sat in a hotel in Baltimore on January 6th. So,
But he was the mastermind behind the insurrection, Steve.
I think most people who pay attention to politics and the news know that Bob Menendez is dirty and he's gotten away with it before. But I kind of just didn't dig into it because I figured they're all dirty. This guy's just maybe the dirtier of the bunch, and they have to set an example. Not that interested in finding out the details until I saw the sentencing, and I thought, I'm going to dig into old Gold Bar Bob and find out what he did and what he got, and think, is 11 years sufficient? And then also we have a nice reply from Bob at sentencing, which I think will bring up a well of tear. You'll be filled with empathy here. So this report comes from the Associated Press. Menendez provided Egyptian officials with information about the staff of the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. So he basically gave him a hit list. Okay. And then he ghost wrote a letter to his fellow senators saying it wasn't from him, but even though he had ghostwritten it, or at least his staff did, and encouraged them to lift a hold of $300 million in military aid to Egypt. So we're going to give him a hit list and $300 million to go and execute that hit list. He also attempted to persuade federal prosecutor in New Jersey to go easy on one of his buddies. And another businessman helped his wife, who's also been under charges here and is awaiting her trial.
Get a Bonnie and Clyde.
They got her a Mercedes-Benz convertible after old Gold Bar Bob pressured state-level prosecutors to drop criminal probes into other buddies of his. So, Garrett, when our former colleagues at the FBI executed a search warrant at his house, they found $480,000 in cash.
Interesting.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Stuffed into his boots and pockets of clothing. And they also found gold bars. That's why he's Gold Bar Bob. Estimated around $150,000 in his house. So dirty as they come. I mean, it's just sort of a plain public corruption. And he gets sentenced. He gets 11 years. So I believe he's going to probably use the First Step Act and wind up doing, 5 years of this? Probably run for re-election in New Jersey and win.
And probably win, yeah.
Quote, "You really don't know the man you are about to sentence."
Oh, really?
No, I think we do, Bob.
Yeah.
Your Honor, I am far from a perfect man. Correct. I have made more than my share of mistakes and bad decisions. I've done far more good than bad, and I ask you, Your Honor, to judge me in that context.
Thanks, Bob. Enjoy
I'm glad
yourself.
we're playing a different game, man.
Yeah. It's just, these people finally, and I don't know, the tides turn like this on occasion, but overall government is corrupt and it will continue to be corrupt. And guys like Bob Menendez, how many of them haven't been caught? But hey, this is a start, and enjoy that cell, Bob. You're not going to be bending over in the shower for gold bars, but you will for soap bars, and you're probably going to like it. So enjoy.
Well, who could be his cellie? I mean, the adjoining state, like we have New York, New Jersey. New Jersey is the armpit of New York, right? So his cellie could potentially be the Senate minority leader, Chuck Schumer.
Chucky Schumer.
Who is now under investigation by the United States Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia for his statements a few years ago. And remember, if you remember these, because I think it led to the FBI saying that there were people that could be going after Supreme Court officials, but mostly it was just code for we wanted to go after pro-lifers. But this is what Chuck Schumer said that got him in a little bit of hot water.
Inside the walls of this court, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments, as you know, for the first major abortion right cases since Justices Kavanaugh and Justices Gorsuch came to the bench. We know what's at stake. Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. From Louisiana to Missouri to Texas, Republican legislatures are waging a war on women, all women. And they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
There's some fighting words
Chuck.
there. There's
Indeed.
So you're a First Amendment expert there. But before we talk about the First Amendment ramifications and just the fun of playing this new game, I did really enjoy, and for those listening, the visual of Chuck Schumer having to tell his audience when to boo by giving them the thumbs down, Caesar in the Colosseum style, because they are such empty vessels. They don't know who the Supreme Court justices are, or let alone where they actually stand on the issues. But reaping the whirlwinds, if they go along with these bad decisions, could that be construed as a true threat?
I think absolutely, because and you're right, Steve. The First Amendment issues here are tantamount. And it's interesting. It strikes me as the same type of hubris that we know from the FBI, that a guy like Chuck Schumer, we just saw it recently with Hakeem Jeffries saying that they're going to fight in the streets. And a lot of these politicians have a legal background. They were lawyers. They definitely have lawyers on their staff. And then they're going to get up and use this type of rhetoric. And we've talked about it before, our First Amendment episodes, especially with unprotected categories of speech. You mentioned those sound like fighting words. Fighting words are unprotected. You have incitement, which is unprotected. And with the position that these people have, the words they're using, the platform they're using, the vitriol and anger in their speech, thumbing down like what's his name in Gladiator, the Commodus, and and then they act like that's fine and that's just political rhetoric. Well, no, because if you have the ability and there's a reasonable belief that it's going to incite imminent lawless action, well, then it's not protected. And when you're talking like that, and then you see imminent lawless action taking place, well, that's not protected speech.
That's where we got to go, because we had that guy fly across the country with a toolkit to murder Brett Kavanaugh, who I'm not a big fan of, but he voted in the right on the Dobbs versus Jackson decision. He had a bag with duct tape and a firearm, and he was going to murder Brett Kavanaugh and his entire family, which is what prompted the U.S. attorney, or the acting U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia, one of the worst entitled offices, to send this letter out to Chuck Schumer. And it's a little hard to read for those who are watching. I'll have to read it off here. It says, at this time, this is from Ed Martin, acting U.S. attorney. At this time, I respectfully request that you clarify your comments on March 4th, 2020. Your comments were at a private rally off the campus of the U.S. Capitol. You made them clearly and in a way that many found threatening. And then he gives an exact quote. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, even though the emphasis is on the wrong syllable, Chuck Schumer. I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you've released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Again, Ed Martin, we take threats against public officials very seriously. I look forward to your cooperation with my letter of inquiry. This is a whole new game, man. If you're actually going to use the lawfare, if you're actually going to follow through on the thing that I've been saying, this is not optimal. I wish we weren't here, but it's far better than one side doing it and the other side saying, well, we can't descend to their level, guys. That's a failure to recognize the battlefield conditions. I'm here for this new game.
Yes, I'm here for it as well. And it's, in a way, it's a shame that it's taken a change in the power structure, because in a nation of laws, which any nation that's truly a nation, you're going to have language, border, culture. And part of that is the culture of your legal system. And in our culture, or the culture that we've had, we've long held that the rule of law is paramount to progressing our culture and to keeping within an American spirit and system. And so it shouldn't have taken Donald Trump and Ed Martin getting into place now. It should have happened then under a Chris Wray, under a Joe Biden, because they could have said, hey, Chuck, we got to take this seriously because we should not be, especially as the quote unquote leaders of the country, inciting this type of rhetoric, this type of violence. And I know I usually go to MTSU's First Amendment Center, but today we're going to go over to FIRE because they're even further left than the ACLU, but they've got a whole page dedicated to categories of unprotected speech, and right here at the top is incitement. Speech that is both, quote, directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action, end quote, is unprotected by the First Amendment. And again, they could say, well, or Chuck could say, well, it was just political rhetoric. That's the kicker, though, is if there's a reasonable belief that it was directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action. We saw lawless action because of those words. Or I think a reasonable argument at least could be made that it was because of those words and words like it. And then next, you've got true threats, which the Supreme Court defined as, quote, those statements where the speaker means to communicate a serious expression of intent to commit an act of unlawful violence to a particular individual or group of individuals, end quote. And the main case we talk about there is, and they list it down here, Watts versus United States, where a draftee said, quote, if they ever make me carry a rifle, the first man I want to get in my sights is LBJ, end quote. And it says that statement was not a true expression of intent to kill the president because it was politically motivated. And he used the caveat, if he also didn't have, even though he did it in front of a crowd, he did it on stage behind a microphone like Chuck did. He doesn't have that platform. He doesn't have the ability to incite an actual threat.
You could actually make the case that Chuck Schumer, although his speech there, in the spirit of it, it's First Amendment protected. Again, I'm here for the game that we're playing right now.
Yeah, you
But
absolutely
his
can argue that.
statement is actually further beyond where Watts was, because Watts' statement was, if I ever get a rifle, then I will. Chuck Schumer said, if. He said, if you go through with these decisions, then you will reap the whirlwinds. Well, they went through with the decisions.
Right. And then they
So
wept.
we're further along now.
Yes. And then they repped the whirlwind because there were protests in front of the Supreme Court justices'
Violation of
homes.
Virginia state law.
And then you had the guy you mentioned travel across the country, like to take Schumer up on his rhetoric and say, all right, I'll do it.
All right. Who's your favorite Sesame Street character?
Oscar the Grouch for sure.
It seems appropriate. That's your demeanor. You didn't like Super Grover.
I when I was a kid, I like Snuffleupagus the most. I'll tell the truth.
Closest resemblance. Very good. All right. Let's talk about NPR and PBS are in a little bit of hot water, or at least they're under investigation through the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, because all of these elements of the government are being weaponized against them now.
Oh no, there must be the Nazis.
I need to preface this with, we shouldn't have an NPR or PBS. The barrier to entry for content creation is you and me on the American Radicals podcast and Rumble. It did not take a big lift. I mean, look, we strive to put out a good product, and I think everything we put out is vastly superior to what you see on PBS and NPR. Let us know in the chat if you disagree. And I am saying that we don't actually have thumbs down today, which would mean that we're maybe down in our viewership. Security division at the FBI might not be working. Maybe they opted into the fork, but
or
generally
they might be on a mental health day because they're worried about getting fired for January 6th goose stepping.
I think generally we strive to put on a good product and are superior to what the American taxpayer gets for its millions of dollars. So this is a letter that the FCC sent over. Basically, the Cliff Notes version of it, Garrett, is they're saying that on regular television, cable, terrestrial TV, you can sell advertising time. And whoever buys that advertising time can say whatever they want within that time. I mean, there's some standards. You can't just put expletives out there, and maybe you're Chuck Schumer and you go out and make a true threat. There could be some ramifications, but that time belongs to that advertiser. right?
Mhm.
But NPR and PBS don't do that. They're not allowed to do that. Their talent, their people on screen looking into the camera can acknowledge these entities that underwrite their networks, but they don't. That time is still not those people. That's the difference. And now they're saying that maybe you've gone afoul of that. My point here is forever. I mean, Mitt Romney made it a talking point in 2012. Oh, we shouldn't be funding Big Bird, right? And here we are over a decade later. And finally, somebody's willing to go after Big Bird because this is not a taxpayer issue. If you want to learn something in the news, like they're not relevant, right? They're not necessary anymore. And the fact that we're subsidizing them as American taxpayers to give us basically regime approved information, that's gone now. At least that outlet of it is gone.
Yeah, it's again, this is, and I don't know, maybe this is prideful, Steve, but I'm going to plug it anyways. We were way ahead of the curve, and I know a lot of people were too, but this is from 2 years ago. I wrote this when, I don't know, I had maybe 7 followers on lastline.substack.com. And
Hey, who underwrites lastline.substack.com? Are you taking any nefarious funds?
No, I'm not. And nobody underwrites it, but you know what? I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of the public funding that goes to the coffers of an NPR and a PBS. And as I covered more than 2 years ago when I was talking about Matt Taibbi's Twitter files, I wrote this. NPR and its advocates try to claim that they only receive around 1% of their annual budget from the federal government. But a bit deeper analysis, including documents available on NPR's website, and I link them because we're about receipts here, show that the 1% figure they like to claim is what they receive directly from the federal government. The most reasonable estimation is that when direct and indirect federal, state, and local government funds are accounted for, NPR receives about 10%, or roughly $25 million a year. $25 million, Steve. You think they could underwrite my Substack with even a fraction of that? I think they could. And this was as of 2018. So I'm grateful for Doge and whatever else is taking place within the new administration and this new game that we're playing, because it's been a long time coming where most people, well, yeah, I would say most, because of the way the election went, they are concerned about some more fiscal responsibility. And why is the government giving money to groups like NPR, PBS, Planned Parenthood, you name them? Most people, if they knew, they would probably be like, I don't want my tax dollars going to that. No wonder we're in $40 trillion of debt.
I don't know anyone who watches PBS. The only time I've heard NPR played is when I'm in Washington, D.C. It's basically radio for them to listen to. I mean, that's it. They're taking again, it's the capital, it's the people that live there that pilfer the treasury, and they say, we're going to stand up our own radio show that spits back to us exactly what we want to hear.
Yeah.
So that we can be entertained while we sit in the traffic, because there's so many of us here who are trying to get at the teat of the treasury, right?
I'm sure you've heard people say this exact quote. On my way into the office this morning, I was listening to NPR. And as soon as
Tell me you're a
those,
communist without
yes,
telling me you're a communist.
as soon as those people utter that phrase, I'm like, oh, here we go.
How did you hear them through the mask? All right. So, speech. I got a little bit nervous when I saw this one. I had to do some reading on this one. I want to throw it to you, Garrett, because we talked last year about the Congress passing forward this anti-Semitism bill because they reacted. The Republicans at the time completely panicked. And they said, oh, look at all these protests going on at college campuses. We need to have an anti-Semitism bill where we're going to outsource the definition of anti-Semitism to a private organization, which is associated with globalists and European structures out there that say that they should control your thoughts. And naturally, the Republicans did that because the Republicans suck. But reporting from the Daily Signal, and this is now the Trump administration has come in. Last year was the Biden administration. There is an anti-Semitism executive order. And it relates, though, to foreign students and U.S. colleges. So the details are that a week in the administration, so a week ago, the president signed an executive order saying that the policy of the United States is to combat anti-Semitism vigorously. I don't know if, again, I've said before, the government should be in the business of right think or wrong think. I know anti-Semitism is evil, but inevitably, it turns around and comes for you. I think I read a poem about that. There was no one left to speak for me somewhere. And I think it was at a place that really takes anti-Semitism seriously. But just this week, anti-Israel radicals at Columbia University in New York City, they vandalized university buildings with red paint, dumped cement into the toilets, and a mob of protesters affiliated with Students for Justice in Palestine at Ohio State University, the Ohio State.
The Ohio State.
They disrupted International Holocaust Remembrance Day event. Many of the leaders of the radical student groups behind these are on student visas, though. The order requires federal agencies, this is what the actual ask is, Garrett. Federal agencies have to report to the president within 60 days on all civil and criminal authorities or actions within their jurisdiction against or involving institutions of higher education alleging civil rights violations relating to or arising from October 7th. So just tell us about the unrest you're experiencing, is the executive order. The order also says that secretaries of state, education, and homeland security, they need to make recommendations for familiarizing the colleges that foreign students can get denied visas.
Okay, for me, my focus is on the speech aspect. I think there's all sorts of mechanisms that they could use to get rid of foreign students that are causing problems that would be legal just because of the agreement that they adhere to when they get on that student visa or whatever. So that I think is a little bit separate of an issue, but I've got some similar concern here with an executive order like this, because paramount to free speech is letting people speak, even if they have bad ideas. Because the whole point of freedom of speech is that the best ideas rise to the top. And obviously being anti-Semitic is moronic, foolish, hateful, and stupid. And same with speech that is categorical to racism, period. If you hate white people, go ahead and speak it. I don't care. If you hate blacks, Jews, Arabs, doesn't matter. Native Americans, Indians, I don't care who you dislike and who you despise and what you say about them, because you're stupid. And the better argument is that racism is dumb. And I know I'd be called a racist for this, Steve, but being colorblind is a good thing. And that is one of the things that makes America great, is the fabric of our nation is made up of all sorts of different types of people that go back to people who lived here indigenously, and then fast forward through all the different implantations of Irish and English and Norwegian and you name it. And then, fast forward even more, and you got other groups of immigrants that are coming. But I'm going to go to fire again, because this, when people are reasonable in their outlook towards our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, you come to this conclusion, which fire does too. And you can find many an instance where they are unreasonable. But again, when it resorts to speech, here's what they have on their website. There is no, quote, hate speech exception to the First Amendment. Duh. So many Americans wonder, is hate speech legal? And typically, yes, it is. Because
Tim Awol says it's not.
Well, he's wrong, of course. Nobody's shocked by that. And then it goes back again to those unprotected categories that we touched on a little bit. That is where you will find instances where the hate speech, quote unquote, may cross into a stream of illegality. But by and large, it's not illegal. And so when you get an executive order like this, I don't care which side it comes from, I'm typically not a fan.
I would like to see a better vetting process for students being allowed in. I don't know why we need student visas anyway. I think we got lots of people here that could probably benefit from, I don't know, education.
What about the H-1B visa program, Steve?
Only the best and the brightest. Vivek Ramaswamy told us, right? Remember when he was a thing and then not
gone.
anymore?
He gone.
He's running for governor of Ohio, at least until he comes to his next project.
Yes.
Is Vivek Ramaswamy the Andrew Yang of the right? Think about it. All right. Let's talk about this is a story that we've been trying to get to, and then we keep procrastinating about it. talking about a paradigm shift, a different game. We could be in for a whole new game if this becomes proliferated, this information about directed energy weapons. Stick with us, guys. This is being reported by legitimate news, nothing that where they're talking about the fluorides making the frogs gay. The Blaze, fellow suspendables, Steve Baker, Joe Hanneman, exclusive General Mark Milley, who had his portrait removed from the Department of Defense.
And his security detail.
They approved directed energy weapons for use in June of 2020. This is dealing with the Lafayette Square protest where they tried to burn down the church. And then they blamed Donald Trump for doing a photo op the next day. So I've got some significant quotes out of this story here, which is wild to think about. I mean, you're talking about things that if somebody sent me a direct message on a social media platform saying I have information about directed energy weapons, that would go straight into the trash can. Quote, Milley told a small group in October of 2024, we had directed energy weapons at Lafayette Park in June of 2020 to be used against the rioters. The Lafayette Park restroom building and the basement of the St. John's Church were set ablaze. This is when Donald Trump had to get put into the bunker, right? The park police, quote, used a sound amplifying long-range acoustic device, that acronym is LRAD, to issue 3 dispersal warnings to the crowd. Basically, they're screaming like, disperse, disperse, right? The LRAD operated by the park police in June 1st, 2020, was not part of a directed energy weapons authorized by the Pentagon, though. That was actually owned by the park police. It is unknown whether the military directed energy weapons were actually used on the rioters during the Lafayette Park unrest. So what we do know is we had a giant loudspeaker that was telling people to disperse that could technically qualify as this directed energy weapons. It sounds more like a sound amplification thing. But we get more into the details here. Again, reporting from The Blaze, Steve Baker, Joe Hanneman, serious journalists who have done the research. Steve Baker's been talking to me about this since I've known him, which is over 2 years at this point, right? A retired senior military commander at U.S. Special Operations Command told The Blaze that the backpack-size agitation weapon employed by U.S. forces uses infrasound technology. Garrett, did you ever encounter any of this when you were up in Alaska testing stuff?
Never.
Did you know this was a thing?
I did not, but I have since, because like you mentioned, this story has been out there for a little bit. We've been itching to get to it. I did a little bit of my own just open source research, if you want to use that. I don't know if that's even a fair word, because I just punched some things into a search engine, and there's all sorts of open source stuff out there about it. And I'm like, what the heck? And legitimate DoD documents and things of that nature. And I'm like, I'm surprised any of this is out there. But as governments go, always they go poorly and they lean towards tyranny. And now they've created and are using. Yeah, I know it says they don't know for sure if it was used at Lafayette Square. It's the government, and we're at a unique point in history where even our government now is weaponized against people. So if I was a betting man, I'd say, yeah, they absolutely used it. And it's crazy what some of these devices can do.
Here's the quote of what they can do. This comes from a guy with special operations. Quote, it can stop the heart, make you bleep your pants, disrupt any number of bodily functions. This backpack weapon is highly directional with an easily disguised wearable antenna. Sources said that the directed energy weapons have been used as crowd control devices around the world. The weapons can affect virtually any part of the body and make the target feel disoriented, ill, or even violent, which would mean that you could provoke a peaceful First Amendment protected protest into becoming a violent riot so that you could construe it as something that needed to be put down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the odds in this day and age, now that the toothpaste is out of the tube and the cold Civil War is edging ever closer and closer to going to kinetic, that would be a possibility? Maybe the new game where we're going to use lawfare pushes it back into the recesses, or maybe it amplifies it. I don't really know which way it's going to go at this point. I just know that if this is a legitimate tool that's out there, then that's not that's not something that I'm going to trust in the hands of most people
Right.
who've been in our government for my entire life.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I know our government would probably resort to saying, "Well, we don't do that type of thing here."
Yeah.
I mean, oh, whew, knock me over with a feather, Steve. They would never do something like that here. But
No.
the more you learn about our government, the more you think, "Ooh, I'm not so sure about that." And I think it would be bad enough to use overseas. I can think of some scenarios where it could be legitimate if you've got a platoon or whatever who's maybe about to get overrun or something to that nature when you're in legitimate kinetic conflict.
When
But
deadly force is allowed,
right.
right?
Yeah. And
Like
then
if you're making a guy poop his pants in a deadly force situation, all right, I'll allow it.
yes, I'm okay with that. But then if you just pull this thread a little bit more, you'll learn that there's all sorts of MOUs. That's a memorandum of understanding between DoD assets and DOJ assets and
Oh,
other.
they can get attached to civilian operations and say, "Look, in my regular 40-hour-a-week job, I am enlisted in the military in special operations, but right now I'm on special assignment and detail over to this civilian group with the Department of Justice. So anything I do is not actually in the military.
Mhm.
I'm using the exact same tools, the physical tools, and the skill set that I've been trained in the military. And then after today, I go right back to being on post."
Right, right. So this is a very, very, very slippery slope. And I think adding to it, just look at our own history. MK Ultra, COINTELPRO from the FBI. We've had programs that have been as problematic or worse already in our nation's history. And then the government comes out and says, "Oh no, 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 we're fixing that. That's why we had the church committee to fix these type of programs." But we know from history that these programs don't get fixed. They get further embedded into government, or different mechanisms are used, like a secretive FISC, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, where they approve damn near every FISA that comes through. And we know that there's corruption with those FISAs. And there are other more nefarious programs that are kept under more lock and key, that if they were doing it in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I think it's safe to say that they're doing it now. And of course it is, because look at some of the stuff that Edward Snowden uncovered with his leaking. And I think of Titan Point. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but just punch in Titan Point in a search engine and you'll find all sorts of stuff again. And then if you keep digging, you'll be like, "Oh, Titan Point isn't just one big building in New York. There's actually 11 or 12 of them all across the nation where they're collecting domestic information and data." But hey, that's conspiracy theory talk, isn't it?
Well, my one hang up on this, Garrett, is that and it's always even about like the Havana syndrome stuff. Why wouldn't they just do this if other why wouldn't they just do this to foreign leaders, right? Like if you're at an event, I mean, even if just for an embarrassment's sake, if you wanted to make Joe Biden poop his pants, not that he never did that, maybe he got hit with a directed energy weapon. Why wasn't that being done more prolifically? That was like my one hang up. I'm gonna have to wait for part two. I know Steve Baker told me that he and Joe are working on part two, and they're maybe able to connect it to January 6th. So we're gonna have to wait for that
Mm.
one, and we'll definitely maybe we'll try to get Joe or Steve on to talk about that, because that would be a
Oh
pretty
yeah.
huge one. Let's move over to foreign aid. U.S. aid is the
Mm.
acronym where it's called. It's a U.S. agency for international development, which is definitely totally 100% not a CIA carve out. But let's talk about how in this new game, it's a whole new ball game here. Donald Trump is looking to pare that back. So the report that I found comes from the Washington Post. Democracy dies in darkness.
Yes.
Trump moves to wrest control of USAID. Hey, is USAID part of the executive branch, Garrett?
Negative. Or I don't know. Is
Yes.
it?
And Elon Musk says we're shutting it down. All right. Trump administration removed 2 top security officials at USAID over the weekend after they refused to allow representatives of the Doge
Doge.
into restricted spaces at the agency. Now, for some clarity here, Garrett, are you allowed into a skiff and break down what a skiff is.
It's
And
a secret compartmentalized information facility.
so it's
So
a giant room, right?
yeah.
You're not allowed to bring a cell phone in there. Some top secret GS, G was it they say in Rush Hour G14 classified stuff
Mhm.
is going on in there. Sensitive material. They've hardened it. You're allowed to walk into a skiff if you don't have access, as long as
You sign on the little clipboard on the outside, and you're escorted by somebody who
you're
does have ac.
escorted in. So here, what happened was members of the Doge needed to get into the skiff, and they were denied. And they said, "You can't go in there because it's G14 classified."
Mm.
But the actual policy is, yes, we're allowed in there. We're under orders from the president or he's one of his emissaries, and certainly they could be given a security clearance if it was that big of a problem. But
Right.
that's just a misrepresentation of what was going on there. But back to WAPO, they wanted access to the skiff. They were denied. A group of about 8 Doge officials entered the USAID buildings and demanded access to every door, floor, and despite only a few of them having a security clearance. Oh, you mean a few of them that could have escorted the other ones around?
Exactly. Exactly.
When USAID personnel attempted to block access to some areas, Doge officials threatened to call federal marshals. The Doge officials were eventually given access to secure spaces. What is going on at USAID? I mean, what is USAID? What are they supposed to do? Aren't they just like making sure that we have enough tranny shows going on in Ethiopia?
That's what I thought, but which makes you think even more, why do they even have a skiff? What type of top secret information do they have, and why?
The reaction kind of gives it all away, and the fact that whoever was there from the Department of Government Efficiency, this not government agency that we all refer to as the Doge, was wanting to find that out. They had to obstruct it so they could get to the paper shredders in time or do anything they could to be disruptive to it. But US aid is supposed to be one arm of American foreign aid, where we give US taxpayer money, which we don't actually have. So we print it and inflate into our kids and grandkids, or we borrow it from other countries so that we can give to other countries. This is the philosophy of the US government. And now we're getting pushback from the world's richest man worth over $400 billion and the president of the United States, who has a nice net worth himself. I don't know what it is. I know it's definitely in the billions, who said that this is a waste and we need to be America only for a little while when the oxygen masks come down in the air cabin when there's decompression. What is the instruction? You put your own mask on first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your buddy. And we're not doing a really good job because we're $36 trillion in debt. So the connecting piece that I have, I've got this and I've got a nice video and as a connection to our earlier story here. This one comes from CBS News, where they're saying that US aid is going to be merged into the State Department, part of the executive branch. So U.S. Agency for International Development will be merged into the State Department with significant cuts in the workforce, which is one of the highest drivers of expenses, but it will remain humanitarian aid. U.S. aid oversees humanitarian development security programs. Oh, that last one, security programs, in about 120 countries around the world. Now, Marco Rubio is the acting administrator because he's the Secretary of State. And this is the great fallback here, Garrett. It says people who are saying that USAID needs to continue to exist and it's really not a driver of our debt or anything like that. It's kind of like NPR and PBS, which only get 1% of their funding from the American taxpayer, right? You know that foreign aid overall is less than 1% of the federal budget. So we should continue to do it, right? I mean, O.J. Simpson was only really bad for about 1% of that day, right?
Yes.
Does my analogy hold on that, by the way?
I think it does. It's man, when you break it down like that, it really is telling about how much money we spend and waste. Because
Their ask for this fiscal year was $42.8 billion.
oh, that is so much money.
That is
So much money.
3.5 FBIs.
hmm
Now,
I,
what is more important? I mean, like we dunk on the FBI. What is more important to the American people? and
FBI by
FBI
far.
or foreign aid.
Yeah, FBI by far, and it's
And 350% more sending it to other countries. Now, like I've already referenced it, it's going back to the CIA to run their ops and that sort of thing largely. I mean, some of it's that woke stuff, but that's why they're biggest recipients are in places like Yemen and Syria. It's not that we're trying to bring their tranny shows there. It's because we got ops going on. But USAID is the world's largest single donor of foreign aid, and that's not our entire foreign aid arm. That's not it. We have others as well. And if you want in a private capacity to go and donate to the rest of the world, you're more than welcome to do that. Just make sure you don't fund terrorism because that could be a problem for you. That would be a career case, right, Garrett?
oh, no doubt. And I guess along those lines too, I'm okay with zeroing out USAID entirely, putting a little bit more cheddar back in people's pockets. And if you want to donate to Yemen, go ahead. Or whatever other shithole country. I don't care. But we shouldn't be spending our tax dollars in that way at all, in my opinion. But
Well, as long as he's out on the lam right now and he hasn't gotten locked up in the pokey with Gold Bar Bob, Chuck Schumer really, really concerned about U.S. aid. And he's saying that it's not just U.S. aid, it's setting a bad precedent. I don't know if I agree with him on whether or not it's a bad precedent, but now we are again in a whole new ball game, which got me thinking that I'm kind of on board for everything that Chuck Schumer is talking about from the well of the Senate, where he can't be prosecuted for these comments. He was smarter this time around.
We also know this is just the beginning. If Doge attacks USAID today, then you can be sure they'll move on to another target tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Postal Service or the IRS or even the Social Security Administration. They could be next. Or maybe our national security agency.
please, Chuck, all of them.
Do you think the American people would stand for the Doge getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service?
I think we're all for it. I'm all for getting rid of the Postal Service too. I'd much rather be able to go to the nearby FedEx or UPS or whatever else and ship my merch orders that way. Speaking of which, I have been very negligent with merch orders lately. I will try to get them out this week, but um the Postal Service wastes so much money too. And IRS, yeah, okay, Chuck, slash, Social Security, slash it, cut them all, bring Doge into every single one, please.
And the last one he referenced was the national security state or what. I don't think he national security state, but he was
We
basically
are.
alluding to the military industrial complex. This is where Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell get along 100% of the time, right? You imagine they're just unironically saying, if the United States stops foreign aid to bleep hole countries, the next step could be we don't have an income tax anymore and we don't continue to make sure that Raytheon and Lockheed are getting us involved into international altercations so that they could remain in the black.
Mm-hmm. Sign me up for that. That's what we want. So I don't know, Chuck. You're preaching to the choir, and I think more and more Americans are waking up to it.
One of my, I guess, the favorite lowlights of when things were really popping off in Ukraine in the first few months when Russia went into Ukraine was media reporting. And I saw a news story on the Fox News website, and it was saying, we all basically got to get geeked up for World War III, and it was brought to you by Lockheed Martin at the top.
Oh, thanks, Lockheed.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm doing my part.
Hey, did you change your emojis to gold and blue? All right. This one that we've talked about before comes from the state of New York, the Attorney General, Letitia James, and she is warning, in light of the fact that we have a whole new game here, this is introducing a state versus federal conflict.
Good luck.
The New York Attorney General is, the hill stinks. It's now moving. It's been still for like the entire show. New York Attorney General warns hospitals against suspending gender affirming care language. Gender affirming care. If you knew nothing else, you had a nice Men in Black red dot laser shooting your eyes, Garrett, and you knew nothing about the last couple of years and this tranny madness, the LGBTQ rainbow kamikaze, the times that we live in. And I said, gender affirming care. would you think it's more likely that, I mean, hey, son, you have twig and berries, that means you're a boy? Would that be affirming your gender?
Yes. If I heard those words and didn't know anything about them, I'd probably be like, "What? What are you talking about? What is that?
Yeah.
What do you mean?"
I mean, they take the language and flip it 180 degrees, photo negative. So, Letitia James, what's she doing here? She's warning that hospitals that they can't suspend doing meatball surgery on boys and cutting off healthy breast tissue of girls and giving hormones to children under the age of 19 because they could potentially violate New York state law if they were to comply with the executive order. Because I don't want to throw the hill back up, I will just look off screen. New York's Democrat Attorney General Letitia James wants to run for governor. And remember, she went after all the abortion clinics and then, I'm sorry, the crisis pregnancy centers. And then she also said that insurance companies for gun sellers were probably in trouble too. And a woman who's not afraid to use her bully pulpit and the power that she has, well, now it's a whole new game, and she's not used to having it pushed back on her. She warned hospitals that prematurely pausing gender affirming care for transgender minors in compliance with a recent executive order could violate New York state law. The executive order that Donald Trump signed directs federal agencies to block government funds for medical institutions, including schools, hospitals that provide puberty blockers, hormones, surgery, and causing some facilities to suspend gender affirming care preemptively over fear they will be stripped of their federal dollars. So if you want to do it, I guess you can. Still, it's not been outlawed, but we're not going to fund it with government funds. And this is also back to, why is the government funding hospitals to begin with?
Yes.
But I mean, I guess you could make a case of we need to ensure that there is some available care. It's an emergency room doesn't operate for 200 miles because it doesn't get these funds. Okay, maybe you can make that sort of case, but you can choose, right? Well, we still want to cut off the testicles of the 8-year-olds, so we're just going to give up those federal funds. Where is the power of your convictions? Where how strong are your beliefs in this one? Oh, it's just about getting those dollars, right?
Mhm.
So this is a quote from Letitia James. Regardless of the availability of federal funding, we write to further remind you of your obligations to comply with New York state law. Electing to refuse services to a class of individuals based on their protected status, such as withholding the availability of services from transgender individuals based on their gender identity or their diagnosis of gender dysphoria while offering such services to cisgender individuals is discrimination under New York law. It's a whole bunch of words: cisgender, transgender, gender affirming care. Basically, make your choice. You got to live in this state. Do you want to violate New York law, or do you want to get those sweet, sweet government dollars?
Yeah, maybe you should start advocating for changing New York law because it's wretched and vile and anti the real law, God's law of what the truth is. Genesis 1:27, he made them male and female, he made them. It's very simple. And when you start twisting the language, you know that's a satanic ploy because of how obscure and twisted and wicked and vile it becomes. And so, okay, Letitia, maybe the next step in the game is to perp walk you for obstructing the current administration. Do you want to find out? I don't know. I'm kind of ready for something like that and see how far it goes. But then to the people of New York, okay, fine. You reap what you sow. So you have sown a Letitia James. She's probably going to be your next governor. So you can take the next bite of that sandwich, and you're not getting federal dollars anymore. And go ahead and use your state dollars and get taxed more from the state if that way then. Or have crappy healthcare. Your choice. And I don't know. As long as federal dollars aren't going there, I don't really care.
This is why I'm here for this new game, because what this move did was make them fight each other.
Mhm.
We're out. We did the Joker. We took the pool cue. We snapped it in half and said, we're going to have tryouts.
Yep.
And then walked out and over the shoulder said, make it quick. Right?
Uh-huh.
You are forced now to decide, and for all to see, we just want the federal dollars. We have no core of convictions, no principles on this matter. And we're going to go through with the policy that the American people voted for, which is stop giving meatball surgery to kids. or we're going to bend the knee to the tyrant in New York State, and we're going to watch our people suffer as a result because the health consequences will be there because hospitals will shut down.
Mhm.
Where are your beliefs?
Yep.
I'm here for it. I'm here. I love it because this is the sorts of outside the box thinking that we're done in preparation for this new administration. I was talking about it with you and the other suspendables last week as it pertained to the FBI. I thought that they likely planned out those moves and choreographed those moves at the times that they did on Thursday and Friday in such a way that, and you and I have been sitting idle in unrestricted waistbands, staring into camera lenses for a couple of years now. We could not have come up with this.
No.
And I'm here for it.
100%. I've heard from some people in the FBI that with all the panic and mayhem that's going on now, squad mates of some of these people are starting to come up with all sorts of outlandish theories about how Kash Patel perjured himself and about how he knew that this was going to happen, and Pam Bondi also, and they fully intend to go against what they testified about. Really? Really? You're FBI agents? You're this dumb? And of course, the answer is yes, which is unfortunate for everyone. But yeah, you are that dumb. You really think, you truly believe that the current administration, after having been president for 4 years before, and then bringing back a lot of those same people, and then after what we saw the last 4 years, and now he's back, you really think that they set their next division heads up for failure like that? That they sent them into the lion's den to perjure themselves and obstruct? You really think that's what's going on? You That's a whole nother level of stupid, because you have failed to read the room and you have failed to see what this new game is and what it's all about. That it just is so moronic for people to think that, but it's because they also think that right now is the Nazi era, and that the last 4 years weren't. No, 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 no. Tell the parents at the school boards, the Moms for Liberty groups, the Mark Hawks and other Catholics praying the Latin Mass, the multiple face act weaponization, the weaponization against whistleblowers, and I'm not even talking just us. Look at the IRS whistleblowers. Look at how the lawfare was used against Donald Trump. Look at how it wasn't used against Biden Incorporated. And what examples am I even missing here? There's plenty of, well, J6, of course, the crowning achievement of the weaponization. But now suddenly these FBI squad mates want to talk about the Holocaust Memorial Museum trip. No, no, no. That time has come and gone. You are the ordinary men that we have talked about who just followed orders. Even if you knew they were wrong, you followed them anyways. And so don't bring up the Holocaust Memorial Museum trip now. You don't get to do that now. It's Nuremberg now, and you're lucky that you're able to get a severance package out of it instead of a rope around your neck.
The hubris to believe that getting a severance package for 7 months that is all salary, all benefits is the same as being genocided, or that you're being persecuted for your sincerely held beliefs, which are pretty clearly to just follow orders and do what you're told because the government is your religion, is the same as people being put into a gas chamber. That checks with the current population within the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Garrett, what are your thoughts? Because I'm really excited about today's palate cleanse. So not to hurry you up on this one at all. So take it all away.
It won't take long because Proverbs are pretty simple. They're just great, simple statements that ring true and have throughout history. Proverbs 28, 1-5. The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion. And praise the Lord that we're seeing some of that right now. When a land transgresses, it has many rulers. I mean, seriously, could this be any more true for today? Look at what we had under Joe Biden. We had many rulers under Joe Biden because he was not competent or capable, because we are a land under judgment, and certainly we're under him. It goes on, but with a man of understanding and knowledge, its stability will long continue. Maybe we're entering into another stable phase once the threshing is completed. A poor man who oppresses the poor is a beating rain that leaves no food. Those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive against them. Evil men do not understand justice. That's you FBI colleagues. Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand it completely.
We're in an era where we desperately need some stability. We're also closing in on the big game. I'm not allowed to say Super Bowl, right? Because there's
That's
some,
a
I
trademark.
mean, I guess they can take the $2 of Rumble Rants if they want. And it got me thinking about one of the greatest overall Super Bowl commercials and a role for Garrett in a reconstituted FBI under the directorship of Kash Patel, where he too could be Terry Tate, the office linebacker.
Some people said I was crazy when I brought Terry on board, but I'm a firm proponent of paradigm breaking, outside the box thinking. And since Terry's been with us, our productivity has gone up 46%.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, bitch! I am an enforcer, man. Don't nothing go down in my house. It's 100% hard, baby. Sure, I jack a few fools. I give them the pain. But sometimes it's about intimidation, you know. It's mind games.
So, all right, I'll see you later.
Check razor! Check razor! Get ready for the pain, woman! The pain train is coming! Wow! Wow! I got it! It's in there! Don't hurt me! Please don't hurt me! Thank you, Ted! Thank you, God!
But what's really impressed me is how Terry's become part of the Felcher family. He fits right in here.
Surprise, kid! Happy birthday!
As profits increase, the margin reaches a second break-even point here, after which enterprise falls into loss. Any questions?
You know you need a cover sheet on your TPS reports, Richard! That ain't new, baby!
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Janice!
That's not to say that Terry's gone soft. He still does what he does best.
Dude,
It goes on
That-
for 20 minutes, Garrett.
that might be one of the greatest things of all time.
I can see you filling that role quite nicely, and it would fit really well with your current dress code, right? I mean,
Yes.
you've got just do it instead of the jersey. You could just do it in Suspendables merch, available at the-suspendables.com. Garrett hopefully will not be using the U.S. Postal Service after Donald Trump ends it, according to Chuck Schumer. And that's going to end it for us today on the American Radicals podcast, guys. Back with you Thursday. Appreciate you as always for joining us. And until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.